Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Swarm Talk, the Thursday night preview show where, hey, we get to talk about a game. We have not been able to do that in 2 weeks, but we're back. We're better than ever. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're watching live, get in that comments section. Let us know your thoughts as we take a look. Georgia Tech Duke. Big one for the Jackets, and I'm going to tell you why this is a must win for this team, for this program, and for Brent Key. That and more in tonight's episode of Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The crowded booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Well, lock it in, folks. What's up? My name is Bryce Koon, and we are here on the Swarm Talk podcast. Welcome in. If you're watching live here on Thursday night, we appreciate you. If you're watching or listening to this after the fact, maybe you're listening to it on Friday morning. Maybe you've got that, you're going to hit Atlanta traffic on Saturday night and afternoon, heading to the game. Throw this pod on, get your preview, get your takes, as we do each and every single time. And obviously, we'll try to be live post game. Maybe we'll see. Got family in town, so we'll have to see where I can go live from. But the biggest news of the evening is Ralph Leary in the flesh is back around the show. He will not be put on camera. Ralph is mourning a Troy game right now. Troy might be off the list of places we visit here in 2024. Ralph, are you all right? Are you okay?
It's not fun, man. It's not fun. I don't like being here. That's why I'm in the dark. I don't want to be seen by anybody. I'm out of here.
We love Ralph. We love Ralph. But we're talking about Georgia Tech Duke. This is going to be a game, ladies and gentlemen, that we kind of talk about. We start with this. I'm going to get to why I believe this is a must-win game. But what's at stake here? What's something that is at stake for both of these teams? Well, obviously the biggest thing is that Manny Diaz and this Duke program is looking to stay unbeaten for the program's best start since they went 7-0 in the 1994 season. That's something that, that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal in terms of that program, wanting to have some continuity from Mike Elko to Manny Diaz. That's huge. You need that. You're going to need that. They rallied, obviously, from a victory last week against North Carolina. I know a lot of people have their feelings on North Carolina on this podcast and the fans of this podcast. Georgia Tech plays them next week. Next week's going to be a fun week. It's going to be a great week for content. I'm about to get choked up, Ralph. I'm getting a little nervous. Just blew people's ears away right there. What's at stake here, though, is that this is a game for Georgia Tech, and I teased this last night. And I think I might have misspoke in the way I said it. This is not a game that you can lose. I said this isn't a losable game. Yeah, you could lose the game. Theoretically, anything can happen. This is not a game that you can afford to lose. And straight up, it's, I have been, as well as some other people, more lenient in terms of, and a little more giving grace with Brent Key in this program so far this season. You cannot lose to Duke in this team. Now, I get it. They're undefeated. We had a great podcast, a great episode that you should check out with J.J. Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils, where we kind of walked through what the game could look like and what this game would look like. Duke has not played high-quality competition. JJ, a Duke fan, and obviously covers that team each and every single day. He straight up was honest. He straight up believed it. And he even said, folks, he even said that this is a game where Georgia Tech should be able to win. I mean, Duke hasn't been tested in terms of the quality competition. They've only put up over 20, I believe over 30 points once against Middle Tennessee State, who is not a good football team this year. So, and Ultima says it right down here, Ralph, we can put up that comment right there. If you're Georgia Tech, you have to have this game. There's no ifs, ands, and buts, and Ralph, I'm going to change the layout just real quick. Uh, if no if, ands, or buts about this, you cannot, with good confidence, go through the rest of your season. You cannot, with good confidence, go through and talk about a bowl game. You can't talk about forward progression if you lose this game. Let's kind of document what has happened so far. You went up to Syracuse and you faced a team that was playing out of their minds. Kyle McCord was playing unconscious in that football game. And look, we've seen they've struggled since, and they obviously have a weird game where they are the dogs heading over to Vegas tomorrow night on Friday against UNLV. Regardless what you think about them, they got they got hot. They got hot when it mattered. And Syracuse beat you. You played a team in Louisville who I thought was better than you on paper. Vegas agreed with it, and they shot themselves in the foot. You could have had a chance to win it, but you played way too sloppy to really give yourself a legitimate chance to go win that football game. So as I sit here on October the 3rd, we've entered the second full month of college football. You're starting to gain, and Brent Key said it, a true sense of who you are as a team. You can't lose this game and still feel confident about some of the goals that you may have set going into, you know, North Carolina, going into Notre Dame. I don't care the jokes that are going to be made, and look, there's going to be plenty of them. But you got to win this football game, or I don't think you can be telling jokes, because I respect what this program has done in Duke. Manny Diaz to come in and be able to capture, and they've got something nice going on in Durham. But you cannot, in good faith, lose this football game. It's not acceptable. And I would say, and Ralph, I might be a little, I don't know. Ralph was with us last year and we talked about this. There hasn't been a loss, in my opinion, outside of Bowling Green last year under Brent Key, where I said that's unacceptable. I was very critical of the team's performance against Bowling Green. You all saw our channel get demonetized twice, both on Twitch and on YouTube, because we did a film review on it. If you lose this game, there's no, I mean, you'll see 2020, I guess, yeah, 2022 Bryce strike up. That's what you'll see. 2022 Bryce, where he gets on here and talks about the if, ands, and buts, and a big reason why, we got phone calls that season about, hey, maybe you need to tone it down. But you can't lose this football game. There isn't. I all respect to Manny Diaz, all respect to what they're building. I like what we said in the preseason. I think Manny Diaz is going to do well at Duke, but you cannot go and lose this football game at home, coming off of a bye week. All things considered, you can't do it. Look, we talked about it. You have struggled in the interior of offensive line. You have to be able to run the football, and I'm going to talk about some of the aspects of that. But you cannot lose this football game. You can't, because then you really start to question any progression this team has made. You can rationalize why they're 3-2 right now. I think you're going to lose a medium part of the fan base if you lose this game and you look sloppy again at home in what should be a great environment in Bobby Dodd. All of those things considered, you just can't lose it. So that's kind of my thoughts on the game itself, that you cannot lose this football game. Ralph, you can correct me here. Per Bet Online, our sponsors, the line has creeped up, I believe, as of last night to Georgia Tech -9.5. If that's still true, Ralph says no. It's dropped down. It's just straight up flat 9 on Bet Online. Okay, so Duke is a 9-point underdog coming into Atlanta. That makes me nervous. I'm not touching this game, by the way. Not touching this game. But folks, I don't want to oversimplify what this game means. I don't want to oversimplify the intricacies of this, what we're watching during the game. But you do have a matchup, in my opinion, that is going to determine the entire outcome. Duke is among the best in the country in tackles for loss. Ralph, if you wouldn't mind, you can get us the exact ranking that they are in the country. They are very, very, very good at getting tackles for loss, creating chaos, forcing miscues, forcing errors. They're one of the best in the country doing it. That is something that, and Dr. Bob said earlier, Duke is still a flawed team with all the attrition from last year. They might be, but through 5 games against lesser competition, they've done exactly what you would ask them to do against that type of competition. They've created chaos, created negative plays. And JJ talked about that on Tuesday. Really encourage you to go check that episode out if you want to hear more. I'm going to get, here. The matchup that concerns me is what I'm talking about here is Duke has a very productive pass rush. This offensive line has struggled in the interior in the run game, but the Georgia Tech team has not allowed a sack all season. In fact, they're only one of 3 teams in the country that has not allowed a sack. Every other team in the ACC has allowed at least 4 sacks. Duke ranks second in the conference with 17 already this season. And then Alex Howard, their linebacker, he leads the team with 3 sacks and 38 tackles. That to me is the key matchup. When you look about what's going to determine, you can take stats, you can take all this kind of thing. We did an inside numbers piece that you can go check out at thecreditboot.com. If Georgia Tech becomes one dimensional, if they cannot run the football, it's going to allow for this Duke front seven to pin their ears back, go get after Haynes King, and then you're going to get into a situation where number 10 is going to have to go win the football game for you. And I sat here 2 weeks ago on the day and told you, you can't beat Louisville doing that. You might be able to get away with beating Duke because Duke's offense, we're talking about in a second, isn't necessarily explosive or really efficient. I mean, they are among the country's worst, 28, 29% in third down efficiency for the Blue Devils. But if you keep pinning this on number 10 to go win you a football game, he's going to crack. He's a human. That's going to eventually happen. And I go back to that comment that Brent Key made after the loss to Boston College last year. We have to help Haynes out. So Jamal Haynes, Trelane Maddox, Anthony Carey, those 3 guys have to be a big part of the puzzle. Yes. The wide receiver room, I love what we've seen out of Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton. We obviously know Christian Leary's not with the program anymore. It has stepped away. Bailey Stockton, what can he legitimately give you in crunch time? Like, you have to see some of these guys rise to the occasion. Chase Lane is another one. But if you cannot do anything other than just go back and pass the football, that is the recipe for an upset here. If that's what happens, because Duke's pass rush is very, 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 very productive, and they get after the quarterback. They create chaos. They create negative plays, and that's my ultimate concern. That's the key matchup that I'm watching in this one. So that's the key matchup. Now you flip it over to the other side of the football here. The bright spot, and I've used this kind of phrase a lot over the past 2 weeks on our shows. We would have to see, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, we would have to see, and I want to make sure I get this right, a complete 180 from Duke's offense for me to feel like Duke's offense could light you up. They haven't been super explosive. Yes, Malik Murphy does pose a threat, obviously, through the air and what he can do on the ground. But I'm going to reference my Inside the Numbers piece that I wrote on Tuesday. I said, look, third down efficiency, while Duke's defense has been stingy, the offense has been brutal on third downs. They've converted just 28% of the third down opportunities. While they do average 5.2 yards a play, they are not sustaining drives at a high clip. So that's a concern if you're a Duke fan, and it could be a plus if you're a Georgia Tech fan. Now, here's something that, like I said, it's going to be a 180 for this Duke offense to really be able to open it up, and maybe they do. And Duke fans can come back to the show and say, well, you didn't know what you're talking about. But the statistics and the data points show that is not something that they can do effectively, they can do consistently. It would have to be a 180, a change from what has happened so far this season. On the flip side, folks, they love to run the rock. They love to run the rock. You know, while Duke averaged 4.5 yards per carry against North Carolina's defense, Georgia Tech's in front seven, especially the defensive tackle position, has probably been one of the bright spots, in my opinion, so far this year. Duke is not going to stop running it if you turn them away for the first 15, 20 minutes. They ran the ball last week 41 times. 41 times they ran the ball. They stayed with it. It was stubborn, but it worked in that North Carolina game. While they did throw 34 passes, they're not going to stop trying to run the football. So this is going to be very, very physical. It's where it's going to test your depth for a full 60 minutes if you're Georgia Tech's defensive line, and you're going to have to stay gap sound, assignment sound football. Now, look, I talked about in a piece earlier. We've mentioned this kind of on the call-in shows. We've mentioned this in a bunch of different things. You rock with a team that I think is better against the run. The pass concerns me. So you could see a stalemate happen in this game in terms of maybe Duke doesn't really move the ball effectively to begin the game. Do they try to open it up? That's where this could be, and I'm going to throw this out here. This could be a game where Malik Murphy makes his mark. He hasn't really until this point, but this could be a game where he really turns it up a notch and delivers on. Look, guys, this is a guy that won games for Texas last year. This kid is a very good quarterback, a great athlete. It hasn't clicked yet in Durham for him in terms of everything that, and Ralph can correct me, I believe he was a high 4-star. I don't think he was a 5-star, but he was at least a high 4-star. He's got the tools. It's about putting it together. You don't want Saturday night in Orlando to be the night that he puts it together, because you don't want to walk into the locker room after the game and say, well, folks, yeah, they ran the ball 38 times. We held them to 2.7 yards a carry, but man, we let Malik Murphy throw for 200 and run for another 100. You do not want that to happen. You do not want that to happen. So you have to not only contain the run game, but you can't be undisciplined on the back end of the defense and allow this offense in Duke that hasn't been necessarily explosive in terms of what they can do in the passing game. That Georgia Tech can't be that team that it happens to that riles everybody up and is the launching pad for each and every single team every time you play them. I make the joke with our LSU subscribers over Good 24/7. Through the first 4 games of the season, they said, "Hey, if you want to run the football, schedule LSU. You don't want Georgia Tech in this situation to be. If you want to be able to pass the football, schedule Georgia Tech. You don't want that." And I worry because the two above average, I even say above average, the two above average offenses you have faced, they've beaten you. And that's a concern for me because when we start to take the data points, and I talked with someone who's close to the program, he read my piece on the grades and he actually disagreed. And this is a guy who is in the know. He knows what he's talking about. He's very close to what's happening over there, inside the facilities. And he told me, he said, "Bryce, I think your grades are a little too positive because when you kind of take back and look at the first 5 weeks of the season and you look at now the teams and how they've developed, who has Georgia Tech beaten? You've beaten a putrid Florida State team. Putrid Florida State team. Cannot move the ball for anything. You've beaten Georgia State and you've beaten VMI. Georgia State is probably your best win. And they're not very good either. So when you've played quality competition, you haven't matched to the level. And Syracuse, you got dominated at times, and you were able to kind of battle back. The Louisville game was just so sloppy you couldn't get into your rhythm. And Ralph says Murphy was a 4-star at a high school according to 24/7 Sports. Ralph, that's the only service that we use, at least for now. Graded at a 93 and was the 9th best quarterback in the country, 14th best player in the state of California. When you look at the body of work at what Tech has done, it's really hard for me to sit here and say, and I've seen some comments, we had some others that, well, Duke's terrible. Well, okay, you play the schedules that are given to you or that are scheduled, and Duke has answered every question they needed to answer in terms of winning the football game, and that's winning the games in front of them. And that has to count for something. We may leave this game and Georgia Tech might win by 15, 17 points, and that's great. And we can leave and say that Georgia Tech, or Duke that wasn't really challenged like they should have been. But we don't know that. And there's no way that anyone can tell you that with absolute certainty until after the game is played. My biggest concern is that when you take a look back, and I did agree, maybe I should have amended my grades, because I'll give you the grades that he gave me. Let's go back to this. I will give you the grades that he gave me. He said he would give the offense a C, an A against Florida State, but since they're bad, it's a B against Georgia State, a C against Syracuse, where he said for 3 quarters, I'll give you a C, and then for 1 quarter, I'll give you a B, an A against VMI, but why does that matter? And then a D against Louisville. He put it at a 2.6 GPA. So this is a person that I'm telling you knows what they're talking about. So that's something for me that when I look at this game, it's like, okay. And Jonesy says right here, and I know it takes a lot of people off. It's like they've won. Like if it's such a casual take just to say, well, they're bad. Well, I mean, based off of what? They haven't played anybody? Like this time of the year, that's what everyone and anyone wants to talk about. Well, they hadn't played anybody. Well, I get that, but who has Georgia Tech played? You've played 2 above average offenses, above average teams, and you lost them. You played 3 bad teams and you've beaten them. So you're about average. Duke's taking care of business regardless of what you think about their schedule. So that for me is something that really kind of stands out in this football game. Just wanted to kind of get to a couple more things here. We talked about, that as well. And I mentioned, the run defense for Georgia Tech and everything. And the pass defense, folks, I mean, we just got to be honest. Unless we see a complete 180 turnaround of what we're seeing at a number 44 on the football field, he's not a coverage linebacker. He just isn't in what they're trying to do right now. Could you hide that? Could you do some different things? Maybe you can. It's not a strength right now for him. Not saying that he can't ever develop into that. Not saying that he can't be that one day. It's just not what's going on right now. So, hand up, I'm on the Taj Butler hype train. Do we see more of Jackson Hamilton? Do we see some more of these guys that can play a little more loose, play a little more athletic in the passing game? Because if not, and people say, well, Bryce, he wears the neck pad and it's cool and all this stuff. He's getting picked on. Go back and watch the Louisville game. Tyler Shuck played him like a fiddle. That's just what they did the entire game. It's not an indictment on the kid's character. It's just what happened. I like what he does in the run game. Love what he does in the run game. But if it's 3rd and long, we need to see some type of sub nickel package or dime package to get either another kind of box safety you can put in there, i.e. Tay Seymour. Love the way they've used him. Or you get a linebacker in Hamilton or Taj Butler, who we've seen get more snaps as the season has actually graded out pretty well in that category. So I'd love to see that on Saturday because you got to do what's best for the team. And Brent Key talked about this week. This week was spent understanding the personnel a little bit more with some data points, which people may scoff at. You didn't know the personnel already. Well, you have to see how they perform in a game. You get to a bye week, you use the data points you have, the grades, and not PFF grades, but you use the coaches' grades to be able to, how are we grading this film? How are the GAs and the analysts, we get all together. And now we set course of the, 22 to 25 players that we feel comfortable playing with on the defensive side of the football. So I really do believe that we have to see that change. Now, here's the kind of last thing, the last key for me. We go back to offense here. Duke is allowing an average of 16.2 points per game. Regardless, folks, of what you think about the schedule, that's impressive because you still have to execute. You still have 11 guys on the other side of the football field trying to win a football game. You got to get over 20 points to win this game. If Georgia Tech doesn't score more than 20 points, they lose this football game. That's just going to be my sticky note stat of the day. So, Ralph, if you got a sticky note, if you got one on your computer, say Bryce says if Georgia Tech doesn't score more than 20, they lose the football game. I mean, I think Georgia Tech scores more than 20, but it'll be very interesting. I think the bye week has given this offense and talking to people has given them a chance to go back to the drawing board, fix the internal offensive line issues, what you're having in that guard center guard combination. But, if you can force them into a track meet, by all means do it. I will put my hand up and say if Georgia Tech can force teams in track meet, that's a good thing. If they play balanced football on the offensive side of the football, they can run, they can pass. It's going to be hard for Duke to stop them regardless. regardless of what they're going to do. The run defense for Duke has only allowed 3.5 yards per carry, while the opposition is only averaging 4.7 yards per pass attempt. Now, what does that tell us? I'm not going to get on here like Mel Kiper and sit here and tell you that I don't believe in a too high man, shell or whatever. What I will tell you is that you're seeing a Manny Diaz defense that is not going to want to give up the big play. Now, does this play into Tech's strengths and what Haynes King and Buster Faulkner want to do? I will say this: I agree with a lot of the prognosticators out there. The book is out on Buster Faulkner with this personnel grouping at Tech. So the bye week came at a great time for you to be able to utilize some things, give some different looks, go back to the drawing board. But when you're only allowing 4.75 yards per pass attempt, it tells me the opportunity for explosive plays. I get the level of competition, but those teams are still not comfortable taking those shots. Now, what plays into that? The ridiculous pass rush that you have and the fact that you are essentially playing, and Ralph, you can kind of correct me here, you're maybe playing a lot of cover 3, where you're literally having kind of 3 guys not allowed the deep play. But I really do believe that in this game, Tech's going to have to stretch that number to 7 or 8 yards. Haynes King's been insanely efficient, but we need to see some more downfield intermediate throws. I'm not talking about 50-yard bombs all the time. Those will come. You have to set those up. The screen game could be very effective. You're going to ask your athletes to out-athlete theirs. I think that's something to kind of monitor. And then you're also going to have to hit on some intermediate routes and allow your guys, who I like this wide receiving core, I like Singleton, I like Malik Rutherford, you're going to have to ask them to be able to make some moves, to be able to make a couple guys miss and get some some yards after catch or yards after contact. So that's kind of what I say. But I do believe, and I agree, a lot of media people are saying the book's probably out on Buster Faulkner in terms of what he wants to do here. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, hey, now you've got, and Ralph corrected, they played 13 games, like 18 games worth of film. You have 18 games worth of film of what you want to utilize as offense. So now it's time for him to adjust. And that's what you had the bye week. So that's how we're going. All right, let's get the prediction in here before we get out of here tonight. Georgia Tech's a 9-point favorite. I'm not touching this line with my money. I will just tell you that. I do think Georgia Tech wins this football game. My final score prediction is Georgia Tech 28, Duke 16. I don't think Duke's offense can be able to do enough to explosive enough to really take the top off of Georgia Tech's offense. That's going to allow them to kind of place essentially how they played against Florida State. So I'm going 28-16. This offense, I think, is still going to be kind of figuring some things out. I do respect Duke's defense. I respect what they can do wholeheartedly. I got Georgia Tech winning this one 28-16. They covered the spread. They rolled a 4-2, and they play a massive, another must-win contest. Folks, I cannot stress it enough. You have to win this football game. You have to win it. You cannot lose this football game. I got a lot of questions if you lose it, and we'll obviously be talking about that on maybe Saturday evening, maybe Sunday as well. But hey, thanks so much for watching. Ralph Leary in the background. Get your score predictions down below. Ralph says 38-27 Tech. Jonesy says 35-21. Dr. Bob says 31-17, and Ralph says 38-27 as well. We appreciate you watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, keep those comments flowing, and can't wait to see you. Cannot wait to see you in the comments after the game. We'll stay tuned to the channel. If you're listening in podcast, we appreciate our sponsors out there, I believe. And Ralph, before we get out of here, we got a request to open the phone lines. Ralph says no. We'll do a post-game show. We'll open the phone lines in. How about that? Sunday night, we'll probably do a post-game show, open the phone lines. My name is Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for watching Swarm Talk here on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.